The first thing Michael Harlan noticed wasn't the music or the laughter. It was the smoke. Not from the grill, but from the cedar logs stacked neatly in Dean Martinez's designer fire pit. It carried the sharp bite of money, the kind of curated luxury you couldn't mistake for real warmth. The barbecue party was alive with influencers and hangers-on, their voices high and glossy, their bodies staged like mannequins under string lights that hummed against the evening sky. Michael lingered by the fence with a paper plate in hand, watching as his wife moved through the crowd like it belonged to her. Celeste. Her hair gleamed like it had its own filter, catching the glow from the fire pit as if the party's lights existed just to follow her. She wore the kind of dress meant to announce arrival, not comfort, and she was thriving. Laughing too loudly, touching arms too easily, her green eyes wide and hungry. Michael's ribs tightened, but his expression stayed neutral. Years of city sanitation work had taught him the art of invisibility. People didn't notice the men who hauled away their refuse. They noticed the shine of their cars, the angle of their selfies, the glint of a champagne flute raised under perfect lighting. Celeste had noticed once, back when authenticity mattered to her. Back before every sentence she spoke was weighed against what it might look like in a 30-second reel. "Mike, man, you look lost." The voice yanked him from his thoughts. Tyler, swagger in motion, slid up beside him, holding a craft beer like it was a trophy. High school friend, crypto hustler, self-appointed prophet of easy money. His smile was too sharp, his cologne too loud. "I'm fine," Michael said. His voice was steady, almost quiet enough to be drowned by the party's music. Tyler clapped his shoulder with performative affection. "Don't be the wallflower, brother. You got a queen in there, better make sure she remembers it." Michael glanced toward Celeste just in time to see her lean in close to Dean, their trainer host, her laugh spilling like champagne down his arm. The sound pierced sharper than the smoke. He turned back to Tyler, forcing a small smile. "You always were better at this scene than me." Tyler winked. "That's why I win." "You still hauling trash?" "Nothing wrong with honest work, but, come on. You could be doing more. Be more." Michael let the words settle without reaction. If Tyler knew about the cold wallets and digital assets spread across a dozen exchanges, he might have spoken differently. But Michael had learned early that power is safest in silence. Dean's voice boomed from across the lawn. "Everyone. Shots by the pool." He flexed as naturally as other men breathed, shirt clinging to sculpted muscle. Celeste was first to his side, laughing like she'd been waiting for the cue. The crowd surged toward the pool, but Michael stayed where he was, plate untouched. His stomach wasn't built for this brand of performance. Instead, he watched. Dean, the golden host. Tyler, the hustler. Malik, the smooth-talking broker in a linen shirt that cost more than Michael's month of groceries. And Celeste, orbiting each of them, her smile too sharp, her touch too familiar. The pattern formed in his chest like a bruise. He wasn't just an outsider in this circle, he was furniture. A backdrop. A prop. And yet none of them noticed the stillness of his gaze. None of them understood what kind of man they were mocking in real time. The smoke curled upward, blotting the stars. Michael set his plate on the fence and finally stepped forward, not toward the crowd but into himself. A thought pressed itself into place with the weight of inevitability. Trust is for people who don't know how to watch. And I've been watching my whole life. The laughter swelled, the music climbed, and Michael Harlan began quietly cataloging every move in the room. Not as a guest. Not as a husband. But as a man who had just been given permission to prepare for war. The party wound down past midnight, though it didn't feel like it. For Michael, time hadn't flowed so much as stretched thin, stretched cruel. Celeste insisted on staying late. "Helping Dean clean up," she said, with a quick flash of teeth that didn't reach her eyes. Michael offered to help too, but she waved him off. "You have work in the morning," she said. The way she said work, like it was a stain on his shirt that wouldn't come out, sat heavy in his chest. So he left alone. By the time he unlocked their condo door, the silence was suffocating. He sat on the edge of the bed, staring at the framed photograph on the nightstand, a candid of him and Celeste from years ago, before her world became ring lights and hashtags. Back then, she'd leaned into him like she belonged nowhere else. Now, she leaned toward Dean. Michael lay back but didn't sleep. He listened for her key in the lock, for the soft shuffle of heels across hardwood. When it finally came, nearly 3 hours later, he feigned sleep, breathing slow and steady. She slipped beneath the sheets with the careful weight of someone trying not to wake a stranger. The next morning, Celeste hummed while scrolling through her phone, her face lit with the glow of notifications. "Dean says I should really consider doing more networking events," she said casually over coffee. "It's good for the brand." Michael nodded, but his chest felt hollow. The word brand now outweighed marriage. The days that followed weren't filled with confrontations. Instead, they were filled with absence. Celeste became a ghost that left lipstick traces on mugs but no real presence in the room. Late nights at strategy sessions. Laughter on the balcony during hushed phone calls. A scent of cologne in the car that wasn't his. Michael began to notice things others would miss. His military years had trained him to see patterns in chaos. Now he saw the same, only it wasn't enemy troop movements, it was his wife's betrayals sketched in silence. The glass of wine poured when she thought he was asleep. The way she charged her phone face down. The little sigh, half pleasure and half guilt, when she texted too quickly. Each detail was a crack in the glass of the life they had built. And Michael couldn't stop staring, waiting for the whole thing to shatter. At work, hauling bags that reeked of last night's leftovers, he found comfort in the monotony. People assumed sanitation was mindless, but it was rhythmic: lift, heave, repeat. The body labored while the mind ran free. And his mind was running. He thought about how Celeste once claimed she loved his steadiness. How that steadiness was now the thing she mocked. Furniture. That word wouldn't leave him. Furniture didn't move. Furniture didn't resist. Furniture didn't fight back. But he could. One afternoon, as rain misted against the windshield of his truck, Michael searched for a different kind of outlet. He ordered a small, voice-activated recorder from an online store. It felt paranoid, even desperate. But paranoia, he remembered from his training, was just preparation with teeth. When the package arrived, he tested it in his truck. His own voice came back clean, sharp. He slid the device behind the dresser in their bedroom, heart pounding like he was already caught. 3 days. Nothing but ordinary chatter, grocery lists, brand updates, influencer gossip. Michael began to feel foolish, to think he was making monsters out of shadows. Then, on the 4th night, Celeste came home late again, humming as she showered. She slipped into bed smelling faintly of aftershave. Not his. The next morning, when she left for a planning breakfast, Michael retrieved the recorder. He sat on the edge of the bed, thumb trembling as he pressed play. Static, then her voice. Breathless. Laughing. "God, I needed this." A man's voice answered. "Me too. Been thinking about you all week." Michael froze. "Dean." His tone smug, low, unmistakable. The air left Michael's lungs. He gripped the device until his knuckles whitened, forcing himself to listen. "We have to be careful," Celeste said. "About what?" "He's furniture, Celeste. Furniture doesn't notice." They both laughed, careless, cruel. Michael clicked the recorder off. The silence that followed was worse than the laughter. He set it down gently, as though it were fragile glass, and sat motionless. His reflection in the dark window looked nothing like furniture. It looked like a man who had just been given a blueprint for war. Michael didn't confront her that night. He didn't shout, or rage, or beg. Instead, he kissed her cheek when she walked in the door and murmured, "Long day?" She nodded, smiled thinly, and disappeared into the bedroom. He sat alone in the kitchen, the dim light humming above him. His pulse had steadied, his breath controlled. He wasn't weak. He wasn't invisible. He was waiting. And planning. Because if they thought he was furniture, then they had forgotten something simple. Furniture holds weight. And when it breaks with force enough to crush. Michael thought betrayal would feel like fire, rage, eruption, a demand to strike back. Instead, it felt like ice. Cold, still, patient. That week, Celeste announced she was heading out of town for a brand collaboration shoot. She packed 2 small suitcases, kissed his cheek like she was clocking into work, and left with a wave that looked like dismissal. Michael waited until the taillights faded, then moved. He retrieved the recorder from behind the dresser, tucked it into a drawer, and opened his laptop. The glow of the screen lit his face as he logged into accounts no one knew he had, not Celeste, not Tyler, not anyone who laughed at him in that party smoke. Balances ticked across the screen in neat rows, wallets that collectively held more than $4 million in crypto. The world saw a garbage man. The truth was something else entirely. He closed the laptop slowly, pressing his palms against the metal like a vow. Money wasn't the weapon, it was the fuel. The weapon was him. The first decision came easy: stop waiting. He bought 3 more recorders, small enough to hide inside picture frames, under couch cushions, behind the mirror in the hallway. Each device was another net in the water, another truth waiting to be caught. By the end of the week, the devices gave him more than whispers, they gave him a pattern. Dean's voice on Tuesday. Tyler's laughter on Thursday. Malik's low drawl on Saturday. Different men. Same lies. Always Celeste at the center, always mocking. One night, after a recording revealed the 3 men joking about rotating weekends, Michael sat in his truck with the engine off, staring into the dark. His reflection in the windshield was unreadable. Not husband. Not victim. Something else was taking shape. Furniture no longer. The twist came when Celeste herself gave him the opportunity. Over breakfast, still scrolling through her phone, she announced, "I'm thinking about pivoting. Doing more wellness content. People eat that stuff up. Dean says it'll set me apart." Wellness? Michael asked carefully. Men's health, actually. Underserved market, great engagement potential. Maybe free screenings, campaigns, the whole deal. If it takes off, sponsors will love it. Michael stirred his coffee, masking the tightening in his chest. It was almost too perfect. She thought she was talking about her career. She was giving him the skeleton of her own undoing. He smiled softly. "That's brilliant, Celeste. Maybe I can help fund it." She froze, surprised. "You'd do that?" "Of course. You've always believed in me. It's time I show I believe in you." Her green eyes softened just enough to convince her. The irony cut sharp. That night, alone again, Michael began building. Step 1: allies. He didn't need many, just the right ones. People who owed him favors. People who didn't ask too many questions. He found Tamara working the late shift at a cafe near his route. She'd once been a licensed medical technician before her life unraveled into fines and lost licenses. He had helped her quietly then, paying off her court fees with money she never knew was his. Now, he asked for something in return. "Nothing illegal," he promised. "Just real screenings. Real tests. Framed a certain way." Tamara studied him, eyes flickering with curiosity and caution. "Michael, this is about your wife, isn't it?" He didn't answer directly. "It's about the truth. Sometimes people need to hear it in the right context." The plan formed like blueprints unfolding on a table. Celeste would think the initiative was hers. Dean and the others would sign up, eager to support her and bask in their own importance. The screenings would be real, the lab results authentic, but the interpretation would become a knife in the dark. Michael didn't pace. He didn't rage. He sat at his small desk in their condo, the faint hum of the refrigerator filling the silence, and wrote lists. Names. Dates. Weaknesses. Dean's gym had debt. Tyler's crypto empire was smoke and mirrors. Malik's real estate licenses were under scrutiny. Each man strutted like a king, but their kingdoms were rotten underneath. Michael wouldn't need to topple them. He only needed to expose the rot. At midnight, Celeste slipped back into bed, perfume clinging to her skin like confession. She sighed contentedly, rolling onto her side back toward him. Michael lay awake, staring at the ceiling. The moment felt like a crossing, a line erased. He would never be the man he had been yesterday, silent and waiting. Tonight he became something else. Not a husband abandoned. Not furniture mocked. But the architect of a reckoning. And somewhere inside him, beneath the ice and the planning, a thought surfaced that made his lips curve into something dangerously close to a smile. They think they've been playing a game. They don't realize I built the board. The first screenings looked, on the surface, like a triumph. Dean's gym smelled of protein powder and disinfectant wipes, its walls plastered with posters of Celeste smiling in branded sportswear. She worked the room like she was already a mogul, greeting clients, shaking hands, offering a perfectly scripted pitch about men's health advocacy. The influencers applauded, cameras flashed, and for once Michael wasn't entirely invisible. He was a shadow at the edge of the weights, clipboard in hand, pretending to track equipment usage while his real focus was elsewhere. Tamara, in crisp scrubs, calmly guiding Dean, Tyler, and Malik through blood draws and consultations. Each man strutted in with careless confidence. Each man walked out with a file folder that would begin to eat away at them like acid. Michael didn't need to fake the data. The truth was enough. The way it was presented made all the difference. Elevated markers. Risk factors. Language careful enough to be technically correct, dire enough to plant panic. Immediate follow-up recommended, Tamara said, her voice even. And partners notified. The words landed like a match on dry brush. That night, Michael sat at the kitchen table, listening to the recordings. Dean's voice cracked first. How is this possible? I've been careful. Tyler swore under his breath. We were all careful. Malik laughed bitterly. We weren't careful. We were sharing the same woman. Michael pressed pause, his thumb trembling only slightly. He stared at the recorder, feeling the cold satisfaction rise and burn. They thought they were conspiring in shadows. Now they were cornered animals, their voices thick with fear. Yet the victory wasn't clean. Because every time Celeste's name came up in their panic, his chest tightened until he could barely breathe. She wasn't collateral damage. She wasn't an innocent caught in their spiral. She was the axis, the willing participant, the one who laughed loudest when they mocked him. And still, at night, she kissed his cheek as though nothing had been broken. That contradiction gnawed at him more than their betrayal. The pressure rose in other ways too. Celeste's follower count, already strained by online gossip, began to dip. Ashley North, her longtime rival, had dropped a video essay about fake authenticity, featuring anonymous quotes that Michael himself had fed her. The timing couldn't have been sharper. Celeste threw her phone across the room one evening, glass cracking against the wall. Why does everyone want to destroy me? She cried, her voice ragged. Michael picked up the shards quietly, his thumb bleeding where the glass bit him. He didn't flinch. Maybe, he said softly, they're just seeing the truth. She looked at him then, eyes glossy, searching for comfort she no longer deserved. He gave her none. But cracks formed in Michael too. He woke in the night to the sound of Celeste murmuring into her phone, whispering promises to men who thought they owned her. Rage rose hot, demanding to be released. He almost walked into the bedroom, almost shouted, almost ended it right there. But he didn't. He stood in the hallway, fists clenched, breathing like he used to before pulling a trigger. Slowly. Controlled. Calculated. Because ending it too soon would give them what they wanted, the weak husband, exposed and discarded. No. The ending had to be his. One evening, as Celeste rehearsed a speech for the next wellness event, Michael slipped out to the balcony. The city lights pulsed below, neon veins in the dark. He dialed a number he hadn't used in years. Eva Darnell, the voice answered after 2 rings. The best divorce attorney in the city. It's Michael Harland, he said. His voice didn't shake. I need a consultation. Soon. A pause. Then, Bring everything you have. Michael ended the call and slid the phone back into his pocket. Behind him, Celeste laughed into her mirror, rehearsing smiles that no longer reached her eyes. The stage was almost set. Dean, Tyler, and Malik were unraveling in whispers. Celeste was clinging to a collapsing empire. The Wellness Initiative was feeding the very poison she thought was medicine. Michael could feel the climax approaching, a public reckoning, sharp and irreversible. But as he watched the city below, he admitted one thing to himself for the first time: revenge wasn't only about them. It was about him. About proving he wasn't furniture, wasn't invisible, wasn't a man to be dismissed. And that truth carried its own weight, heavier than any garbage bag he'd ever lifted. He inhaled the night air, steadying himself. Soon, the lights wouldn't just shine on Celeste. They would shine on all of them, and the whole world would see what he had seen. The gym was packed wall to wall, brighter than it had ever looked. Ring lights glowed over rows of folding chairs, cameras balanced on tripods, and phones hovered in eager hands. Celeste stood near the entrance, draped in a white blazer that made her look like a keynote speaker. She beamed at the crowd, soaking up the attention that was already beginning to slip through her fingers. "This is about transparency," she told the reporters. "About men's health and accountability." Her voice rang clear, but Michael, standing in the back with his arms folded, could hear the tremor underneath. He had fed her those words. She thought she was owning the moment. She had no idea the moment already belonged to him. Dean adjusted his collar nervously on stage, flanked by Tyler and Malik. They were supposed to present as pioneers of wellness. Instead, sweat beaded across their foreheads, and their eyes darted like animals smelling smoke. A reporter raised a hand. "There have been rumors," she said, "about an outbreak. About inconsistencies in your screenings. Can you confirm?" Dean's smile was taut. "There is no outbreak," he began. His voice faltered. "Just precautionary measures." Tyler leaned forward, gripping the mic. "Media sensationalism is dangerous. We're leaders in this community. Then the speakers cracked to life. At first it was static. Then a voice, distorted by amplification, filled the gym. God, I needed this. Celeste's voice. Breathless. Laughing. The room froze. Phones shot up higher, cameras tilted forward. "Me too," came Dean's unmistakable tone. "Been thinking about you all week." Gasps scattered like sparks through the crowd. Then came Malik's voice. "We were sharing the same woman for months." And Tyler's laughter. "He won't find out. He's furniture." The silence afterward was suffocating. Every device in the room was recording. Every eye turned to Celeste, who stood frozen, her smile collapsing, her face drained of color. Dean's chair screeched backward. This is taken out of context," he shouted, but his words were swallowed by the next line echoing from the speakers. Poor Michael. Always there, always silent, like furniture. Laughter, overlapping, cruel. And then Michael's voice, calm, cutting through the din as he stepped into the light. "That's me, gentlemen. Furniture. You forgot furniture has ears." Every head swiveled toward him. He didn't look at Celeste yet. He looked only at them, the men who strutted through his home, who thought themselves untouchable. "Everything you've heard," he said evenly, "was recorded in my own house. With my own equipment. Every word you mock me with is yours." Dean lunged forward, rage replacing panic. But Michael moved without hesitation, sidestepping as he'd done 100 times in training. Dean stumbled into the weight rack, crashing to the floor. The crowd roared shock, laughter, disbelief. Phones zoomed closer. Tyler tried to speak, but his words were drowned by shouts. "Is it true? How many? You ruined families." Malik pushed toward the exit, but the aisle was clogged with people recording his retreat. Celeste stood trembling, mascara streaking, as a reporter thrust a mic toward her. "Mrs. Harlan, did you know about this?" Her lips parted, but no sound came out. She turned toward Michael, eyes wide, desperate. He looked at her for the first time that night. Really looked. The woman who had once leaned into him with trust now stood stripped bare, a performer with no script. "Michael," she whispered. "Please." His reply was almost gentle. "Transparency, remember? That's what you wanted." The speakers carried the last line of recording, Tyler's cruelest joke. "The man empties garbage cans for a living. He's not exactly criminal mastermind material." The room erupted. Some laughed, some jeered, some recorded silently, their screens capturing careers crumbling in real time. Michael let the moment breathe, then set the mic down carefully. "Consider this your health check," he said, his voice steady. "The diagnosis is truth. The prognosis, terminal." He turned and walked out, the crowd parting like water around him. Behind him, chaos erupted, reporters shouting, men pleading, Celeste sobbing. But he didn't look back. Not once. The night air hit his face cool and clean, like absolution. He inhaled deeply, steadying the storm inside him. For the first time in years, he didn't feel like furniture. He felt like the one who had pulled the house down, brick by brick, lie by lie. And he knew, as the roar of the crowd echoed behind him, that nothing in their world would ever stand the same again. 6 months later, the gym was gone. The windows were papered over, a faded, "For lease," sign peeling in the wind. Where once there had been neon slogans about strength and discipline, there was only dust and silence. Michael passed it sometimes on his way home from his new apartment. He never lingered, but the sight always made his chest feel lighter, as if the city itself had erased evidence of those who mistook cruelty for power. Dean had vanished from social media. Tyler's investors filed lawsuits that left his name toxic even in anonymous forums. Malik had been stripped of his license, his once slick smile reduced to a mugshot shared by gossips and local news anchors. And Celeste was still online, but in fragments. A desperate live stream with shaky lighting, a handful of half-hearted posts begging for sponsorships, apologies half-formed and swallowed by trolls in the comments. Her empire had collapsed into rubble. Michael never blocked her, but he never answered either. He lived different now. His new apartment was uncluttered, deliberately so, no stage decor, no curated corners for cameras, just clean lines and silence that belonged to him alone. On weekends he cooked his own meals slowly, savoring the hiss of garlic in a pan, the warmth of wine against his throat. Sometimes, he invited Ashley North over. Ashley, the rival Celeste had once despised. She had laughed when he told her the full story, not cruelly, but in the way a person laughs when irony is too sharp not to taste. Their relationship was cautious, unhurried. She knew the scars he carried, and he knew she wanted no performance. With her, he didn't need to prove anything. And that was enough. One evening, as summer bent into autumn, Michael walked down to the river that cut the city in two. The air was cool, the water reflecting the skyline like a broken mirror. He leaned on the railing, listening to the hum of traffic overhead. For years he had lived as if he were invisible. For months, he had lived in the blaze of vengeance, every step deliberate, every move a strike. Now, finally, there was quiet. And in that quiet, a question he hadn't allowed himself to ask until now: what had it cost him? Not money, he had more than he could ever spend. Not status, he had never wanted their approval anyway. But the years with Celeste, the pieces of himself he had given freely, believing in her laughter, her warmth, her promises. Those he would never get back. Revenge had given him justice, yes. But it had not restored what had been stolen. Nothing could. Michael exhaled, the truth heavy and cleansing. Justice was never restoration. It was release. His phone buzzed. A message from an unknown number. "Michael. Please. Just 5 minutes. I'm sorry. I need you." He stared at the screen, thumb hovering. Once, those words would have undone him. Once, he would have rushed back, believing in the version of Celeste that lived only in memory. Now, he deleted the message without a second thought. The phone screen went dark, reflecting only his own face, steady, sharp, unflinching. When he turned to walk home, the city lights caught on the river, scattering into 1,000 shards. For a moment, it looked like stars had spilled into the water, unreachable but beautiful. Michael didn't smile, not quite. But his chest felt lighter than it had in years. They had called him furniture. But furniture holds weight, holds history, holds lives. And when it breaks, it doesn't beg to be fixed. It clears space for something new. He walked on, steps measured, shoulders straight, leaving the night and its broken reflections behind him. And the silence that followed was not absence. It was freedom.